I have to say it's a little bit more intimate than I anticipated. The last time I was at User Day, there was a great big lectern and we were away from the stage. And when I walked in this morning, I thought, oh my goodness. But you seem like a very friendly bunch and I know we'll get along just fine. You are, brilliant. Well, good morning, my name is Neil Franklin. I'm the Group Procurement Manager at Microfocus. And I'm here this morning to discuss some of the challenges that change often presents. And we have a little agenda. It looks like a lot, but I promise you over the next 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, we'll whistle through these. There's basically 4 sections, one of which is the introduction, which I'm doing now. We're then going to have a look at perhaps what you perceive change to be and how it can be perceived sometimes and received. We're going to do, for the sharp-eyed amongst you, we're going to do a bit of audience participation. Now, that's always my favourite, and I know that when I'm sitting on your side of the arena, it's always a nervous time for me, but I will be gentle with you, I promise. I think Neil kind of built it up this morning a bit. It's not necessarily a case study about delivering. It's more sharing some of the experiences and pitfalls we went through when delivering iPOS. And then we'll give you some tips on how to overcome some of the challenges that you might perceive or encounter along the way. Now, a little bit about myself. I'm not PMP, I'm not a Prince 2 practitioner, I'm certainly not lean, and I'm definitely not Sigma 6. But what I am here today is to share with you a little stroll through change management from someone who's qualified by experience at least. And you might be wondering, well, what has change got to do with me? Well, as procurement practitioners, I'd argue that it's got everything to do with you. Whenever you're dealing with a change in the supplier environment in any way, shape or form, it's going to impact people's lives. And we need to be mindful of this. A little bit about Microfocus. Microfocus are a software manufacturer, and our prime core business is COBOL. We migrate mainframe solutions, big mainframe infrastructures, into more agile, leaner, smaller platforms. Now, some of you may be looking and thinking, COBOL, is that still around? Well, yeah, very much so. And it affects our daily lives in more ways than you could possibly imagine. And you might be then thinking, well, a guy who sells a 50-year-old product is here to talk to us about change management. What on earth is he going to know about it? Well, as an organisation, we understand change, both in our product offering to the world and also about its impact upon us. So a little bit about COBOL. COBOL still powers and deals with 70% of the world's business transactions today. There are 96,000 vacations booked managed by COBOL on a daily basis. It handles and manages the care of 60 million patients absolutely every single day. And one that's quite staggering, certainly was when I first saw it, there are 200 times more COBOL transactions in a single year than Google and YouTube put together. Not bad for a 50-year-old. But COBOL today is as modern and as relevant as any other software out on the market. So a little bit about change management, and this slide, a bit like Neil demonstrated earlier, this slide is more, if you want a decent set of slides to give some insight and introduction into change management, if you go onto YouTube and type in what is change management and you look for that image, they've got a really friendly, nice, catchy way of sharing what change management is. I'm not going to share it with you today, but I wonder what the definition of change management is that comes to your mind. Now, the amount of people in this room, if I went around the room, I'm sure I'd also get a different version from everyone. Changemanagement.com, I'm surprised there is such a thing, but changemanagement.com says ultimately the goal of change is to improve the organisation by altering how work is done. I'd like to also add, it's about mitigating the risk that you perceive on the journey you're about to take. So if this is change management, what is change? Well, the slide says it's an inside job. And what do we mean by that? Well, what I mean is it affects all the individuals within your organisation in some way, shape or form. So you can contract with a professional services delivery partner. They can come in and they can manage your whole project. But when the dust settles, the door slams and the car park is exited by the consultant, you're the one left with dealing with the change. So change for me is very much an inside job. Now, I wonder what your view of change might be. Could it be as this image suggests, or certainly suggested to me when I selected it, that it's leadership-led. It's a group who are sharing the load. It's balanced, it's cohesive. They know the direction they're about to embark upon. I wonder if that seems like your definition of change management. Or maybe your perception is more of this, the plate spinner, juggling conflicting priorities, running from one crisis to another, and if you don't get to it in time, all that's left is you've got a load of pieces to pick up. Now, of course, you might be somewhere in between, but for me, change is more than just a frame of mind. It can only go one of two ways in my book. Nice green, successful, or not so nice, unsuccessful, red, bad, bad. However, my view is that it's about the benchmarks that you set. Set your benchmark too low, then you might be deluded in thinking you've just delivered some successfully delivered change. Set your benchmark too high, and it may taint how you approach change in the future. So I like to view success more as about defining success. And before you embark upon any change management process, I'd encourage you to understand what success looks like, define success, and then you need to communicate success. The finish line will be surrounded by naysayers, all ready to judge how successful or not your project was. But if you've measured success, if you've defined success, measured it, and then communicated it, you stand a far better chance of convincing those people who are there to watch every step you're doing. Now, that being said, what you're actually dealing with is if you haven't communicated success to some of the stakeholders, then they'll automatically have their own version of what success will look like. And anything you deliver may fall short of what their version of success really is. So to increase your empathy stakes on what success looks like, or what change can be as part of the delivery, the impact it can have on the individuals receiving it, this is where we do the audience participation, and this is where I exact my revenge on every time I've been sat where you are. So if you'd all like to stand up, please, we're going to do an exercise in change to demonstrate what change is all about. Yes, we've been sat down quite a bit, and I know we've just had coffee, but don't worry, I will be gentle on you. I promise, I promise. Well, just like every good bit of change, what I'm about to share with you is you must do as I say, not as I do. I want you to do this off your own steam, in your own way, and however you do it. And all I'm going to ask you to do is remove any sharp objects from your hands, any valuables you don't want to fly across the room. If we're all standing, waiting comfortably, right. The exercise, if it's comfortable for you to do so, and you can do that, I just want you to fold your arms across your body and hold them there. This change management business is really easy, isn't it? That's fantastic. I've got 100% success rate. Well done. So keep your arms folded. Because, unfortunately, news just in, our health and safety colleagues have decided to avoid repetitive strain. I hope this is a purely hypothetical situation and never materialise. The law now states that everyone who folds their arms must unfold them and refold them the other way so as to ensure symmetry of muscle density and equal pressure on joints and tendons. Reads just like health and safety normally does. But what that basically means is we're going to unfold our arms, and then we're going to refold our arms the other way. So if you were a left over right person or a right over left person, you've got to do it the other way. Now, you're not looking as comfortable as you were a minute ago. And some of you, I certainly had to think about what I was about to do. How does it feel, though? Does it feel a little awkward? A little uncomfortable? Unnatural, even. That's what change can feel like to the recipients of it when you're delivering it. Some people's entire jobs may be completely transformed because of what you're bringing to the organisation. Their jobs that may be the reason they took the job, and all of a sudden you're putting them in this situation. So it's very important that we consider these factors. So that, give yourself a round of applause, was a little exercise in change management, and you may sit down, not on your sharp objects or anything else. So, not really a case study. But about 3 years ago, I inherited a project which was to deliver iPOS 5.7. And the decision had already been made, and I know Peter's going to talk about a decision process in a minute, but the decision had already been made. My job was to deliver iPOS. So it was a little bit further down the road, and certainly there was a lot more work had gone, well, we weren't quite sure just how much work and due diligence had gone into exploring what the stakeholders' needs were. However, some of the constraints or restrictions were, well, we had a phased rollout across 26 countries in one language. And as Neil mentioned in his presentation this morning, we probably didn't fully understand and appreciate the cultural differences. This project team had successfully delivered a hugely successful upgrade of Sun from 4 to 5, just 12 months previously. And even the rollout to the other countries had gone really well. And I think we didn't quite anticipate the new target audience in the new regions as much as we probably should have. We also had to do it during a financial year end, so the cards aren't stacked against us at all here, are they? And there was one final issue. We had limited resources. Now, what I can say is when I had a look at where we were in the process, I thought I'd do a bit of due diligence and go and do some consultation to make sure, qualify where we were. So we started asking questions of the departments, of our stakeholders. Now, when we spoke to finance, they just wanted control. We want something that bolts seamlessly into Sun. Okay, yeah, that sounds like a reasonable checkbox. When we spoke to procurement, we want control, we want transparency, we want it to be robust, we want it to have integrity so that we can stand in front of the auditors and say, wonderful. We went to HR, and they are very busy people, and all HR wanted was the ability to approve PRs on their BlackBerry. We don't want to be running in and out of systems and clicking on things, we just want to approve things on our BlackBerry. We went to marketing. Not sure anyone cares what marketing thinks, but their output was really, we just want a colour palette that doesn't contravene corporate Pantone 295. So with all that in mind, we thought we could embark upon this project. Well, I'm happy to stand here and share that we installed iPOS. We got it out across 26 different countries in one language. We survived year end, and so did all the others. And we did it with limited resource. But as far as how successful it was, how well did it really go? Well, it delivered the control, and it delivered the transparency. We delivered the mobile users, and marketing got their colour palette, and we are sitting here 2.5 years on with good integrated systems, and we are contemplating 5.8 at the moment. And we're all eagerly awaiting it, but there were still some very valuable lessons that we had to learn. And we'll certainly approach the change in a different way going forward. And what I want to share with you now is some of the things that you can do to ensure that you succeed where others have failed. You might be used to hearing this sort of language. They've tried this before, it will never work. It impacts on me personally. No one asked me or involved me, and what about the customer? Well, these might just sound like you, certainly some of them sound like me, but they're not just naysayers wagging their fingers and saying this will never work and trying to defeat you at the start. You need to see these as important alarm bells as you approach them, because there are wonderful lessons that you can learn if you pay attention to this sort of feedback. Yes, they might just be naysayers who are resistant to change, but if you dig a bit deeper and get a better understanding of why they're making those types of comments, it helps unravel the process that you have to go through. So, these messages, we shouldn't really dismiss them. They always give you information. Failed projects, failed change management can leave a huge legacy within your organisation. And people will always take a trip back to the horror stories that went on before. And if you don't pay attention to these messages, this is all that you'll be hearing. And your project or the level of success will be tainted by people's view of it. So what's important is that you take these precious nuggets of information and learn from them because they provide very valuable lessons learned. Once you as a change manager or somebody involved in change has analysed it, assessed whether it's relevant or not, you can then go back to the naysayers and say, look, we've heard all your concerns, but what we're about to do, we'll learn all the lessons from the past. The old adage, learn from the past, don't live in the past. And we need your cooperation to take this forward. You can never ignore the 3 Ps of change management. The first P, people. Second P, any prizes? People. And the third P, people. People are the key to delivering change management. You will always come up against people's reluctance or intolerance to change, resistance to change. You'll always come up against people's lack of understanding of why the change is being brought in. You'll come up across people who just don't like being rushed into things. And very often the response is, look, we've just got to do this, so just get on board and move on. You have to listen to the people. And you might even just come across people who just don't play like you. And that's a good enough reason to resist change. However, I bring good news, because there are things you can do to overcome these sort of issues. I'll put them all up at once for you because it's a very complicated slide. And if you apply green ticks to each element of this slide or phase, then you've got a far greater chance of succeeding than you had if you don't. So when we talk about consult, what do I mean? Well, during the approach to the delivery of iPOS, we consulted. Marketing didn't get their colour palette, but we consulted. But when you're delivering change, what's always helpful is to run daily clinics. I ran a daily clinic during my tea break, coffee break, got in amongst the users to understand what their concerns were. I wanted to understand what their feedback was, what they were hearing coming, filtering through the communication process. Because if you get people on board early in your process, I guarantee you, you're halfway there if you get the people on board. You can have the right technology, you can have the right platform, you can have the right environment, you can have the right people and the right timeline, the right amount of training, but if you don't have people involved in the right way, you can be finished before you start. Because when the technology falls over, when the furniture doesn't arrive in the new building on time, whatever it is that happens that you weren't expecting, it's going to be the people that bring you through that process. And they'll make the difference between, look, let's all just muck in and get round this, or you going off on stress leave. When we talk about communication, it's not just about communicating with the senior member of the team, the senior member of the department. It's to all levels that are affected by the change. And the more levels of layers of people you try and communicate through, the more your message will get distorted, distracted from, and may end up with a completely different environment altogether. You'll have other people's view of change being, or their understanding of what you're trying to bring around. So it's very important that you communicate with all the levels, with the people who are doing the job, because they're the ones who'll give you the feedback. Use all the tools you have available to communicate. Face-to-face. Use emails if you have to, if you're reaching a wider audience in different geos. Use your internet, use your SharePoint, use absolutely everything you have at your disposal. I believe you can't over-communicate. And then you need to adapt. Communication's a two-way process, and you may well get something, receive something that's going to impact the success of the project. So you need to be ready to adapt, to steer around an unforeseen, and there'll always be an unforeseen obstacle that no amount of due diligence or contingency planning would have prepared you for. So if you need to change course slightly to achieve the objective, then it's far better to do it in an ongoing process than be completely off kilter when you arrive at the conclusion of your journey. You take that feedback. Once you've adapted, go back to the beginning. Consult, communicate, and move on. You personally may have to adapt. You might be the resistor to change. So we need to be vehicles for change, not barriers for change. And I'd like to give a takeaway slide, and this one's a bit of a blast and assault on the eyes because there's quite a bit on it. But if you hear nothing this morning that appeals to you about change, I'd encourage you to pay attention here. We need to consult, consult, consult. The people with the solution are the people with the job. They're the ones who are going to give you your answers. They're the ones who are going to give you the feedback, and they're the ones that are going to help you through the process. When I say get involved and find out, what I mean is don't rely on all the subject matter experts to come to you with all the information, because I almost guarantee they won't. Very often you have to tease things out of people, and it's not until you probe and ask questions. Get involved, go and walk through a process to understand, to get a full understanding of the change that you're about to deliver. If you're delivering change, you need to be transparent and open. And what do I mean by transparent and open? I mean, if there's a crack that appears, you see a flaw in the process, don't gloss over it. You need to highlight it. You need to bring it out in the open and have the discussions about it. And if it's serious enough that it's going to threaten jeopardize the result of the project, then you need to have a conversation with the most senior stakeholder involved. Because the last place you want them to find this out for the first time is around a project table. The old adage of have the meeting outside the meeting. You need to be accessible and provide the opportunity for people to ask questions. This was a particular challenge when we were rolling across 26 geos. Where we spoke English as a first language, that was absolutely fine, but providing information with limited resources and opening up a consultation period was very difficult in some of the different time zones we were juggling. But we juggled time zones and we worked with people to ensure that everybody got a fair sounding. And then actively listen. What do I mean by actively listen? I mean when your subject matter experts are coming to you, listen to what they're saying. You can have a Gantt chart, you can be focused on the project timeline, you can be so focused that actually if we start delving into that now, my project's going to drift and disappear and I'm not going to deliver on time, then you're not actively listening. You need to hear the message behind the message that people like to convey. Very often people don't just come out and say, this is not going to work for my department and I'm not going to do it. They'll dress that up in some other way, shape or form. If you're receiving change, you need to share knowledge. The experts, although they might appear to be experts when they come to see you, they're not the experts in your field. And you need to share with them everything you can. And that doesn't mean just answering the questions they ask you. It means imparting all the information you think they'll need to help them succeed. And if they don't give you the right sort of noises, you need to ask questions. You need to probe and challenge and find out what the end of the road looks like for them and to tease out all those different answers that you're not hearing, the sort of responses that you think you should be hearing or the concerns haven't been met yet. And then once again, you need to listen. And somebody very wise said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that's the proportion in which we should use them. Listen twice as much as we talk. Now, that being said, if you observe all these, you stand a very good chance of avoiding this, being the only person heading in the wrong direction because you haven't paid attention to what was going on around you. And even if you do manage to avoid this, what's more important is you avoid ending up with this. Change management is like teaching a toddler to walk. You put all the sharp objects out of their way. You take all the precious items off the right height, the wrong height, but I guarantee there'll always be bumps and scratches along the way, no matter how much contingency planning you have. And finally, I'd just like to respond by any questions that you might have. Now, I said to Deanne earlier, I was really pleased because the first few sessions, nobody had any questions. I thought, that's going to be brilliant. I'm going to get off lightly. And then, of course, you overloaded, well, you bombarded Deanne with questions, and I'm sat here hoping that there's no further questions. But, oh, I am joking.
Any questions for me? Nope. Okay, can I ask a question, actually? In relation to your rollout over the 26 countries, did you find that there were distinct challenges in terms of localization for what people actually required in those countries? And was that planned for up front? And how maybe did you cover that?
I mentioned that there'd always be unforeseen circumstances that you couldn't predict. We hadn't realised that actually, because of the geographical spread and our organisational structure, our financial controllers in the regions are very much in control of their region. But what we didn't realise when we're bringing a P2P system in was that actually people in France don't care for purchase orders. The supplier doesn't need them. He's happy to take your word that you're going to fulfil your commitment on the order you give him verbally. But we'd made it an internal control. And so we didn't really foresee that. We also had an issue in Italy that nobody else was aware of about the sequential numbering of invoices. So iPOS very graciously allows you to delete and correct an invoice if one of your processors makes a mistake. However, the Italian government don't let you have gaps in your invoicing sequence. So that was something else we absolutely hadn't foreseen and kind of jumped out at us with alarm bells ringing.
So whatever your planning is, be ready for the challenges that you're always going to miss.
Yeah, expect the unexpected.
Thank you. Anyone else with any questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Neil. Much appreciated, and great to see you here.